Chapter 23. We left the village the next morning. For 3 days the trail led through a rough, mountainous country so sparsely populated that we were obliged to pitch our tents each night. No provisions had been taken along for this trip, yet when food was needed it was there. No sooner were the arrangements made for a meal than an abundance of food was right at hand to be partaken of, and at no time did we see it all consumed. There was always a little left. The evening of the third day we reached the head of a wide valley, through which valley we were to travel to reach the village of our destination. From this time on our road led through a fertile, well-populated valley. We had selected this village as our winter quarters for the reason that it was located in the very heart of the country we were visiting, and we felt that it would give us the opportunity we desired to come in daily contact with the people for a longer period of time. A great many of the people we had met in the different places we had already visited lived in this village, and they had all extended cordial invitations to visit them. We felt that, by staying in this village for the winter, we would have ample opportunity to observe their daily life more closely. We reached this village November 20th and made a number of short trips from there until the snow came on and travel was made difficult. We were housed in very comfortable quarters, the people were very kind, and we prepared to enter into the life of the village. All the homes were thrown open to us, and we were told that the latch strings were always out and that they considered all men brothers. At this time we were invited to share the home of one of the remarkable women that lived in this village, whom we had met before. We felt that we were comfortable and that it was not necessary to trouble her. She insisted that it would be no trouble, so we moved in, bag and baggage, and made her home our home during the remainder of our stay. I shall never forget the first time we met her. It was in a small town near the border. When she was introduced we thought she was not a day over 18, and we all thought her beautiful. What was our surprise when we were told she was over 400 years old and one of the most loved of teachers. Her whole life was spent in the work. When we first met her we had been thrown in daily contact with her for nearly 2 weeks, but her true self did not show forth until we saw her in her own home. After living in her home and being in daily contact with her, we could readily see why the people loved her as they did. It was impossible for anyone to do otherwise than love and respect her. We lived at this lady's home and ate at her table from the last of December until the following April. We had ample opportunity to observe her home life and the home life of a number of others in this village, and we found their lives ideal. The more we saw all these people, the more we loved and respected them. We had ample opportunity to corroborate all that they told us regarding their ages, by records that could not be contradicted, any more than our records can be contradicted. Chapter 24. Time went on until the last of December and the year was drawing to a close. We had noticed that a number of persons were congregating for the one ceremonial event that the masters participate in practically alone. Each day we were introduced to strangers. All spoke English, and we began to feel that we were a part of the village life. One day we were told that the event would take place on New Year's Eve, and we were invited to be present. We were also told that, while this event was not for outsiders, it was in no way a secret meeting, that none of their meetings were private. The assembly was for those who had commenced the work, had taken it up in earnest, and had gone far enough to realize that they wanted to live the life, those who had accepted the higher consciousness and realized what this meant in their lives. It was called by some the Feast of the Passover. These gatherings were usually held at some stated location at this time of year, and this place had been chosen for the occasion this year. The morning of the day appointed for the assembly dawned bright and clear, with the mercury well below zero. It found us all eager, for we felt that this evening would add to the many interesting experiences of the trip. We arrived at the appointed place at 8 o'clock that evening and found about 200 assembled. The room was lighted in the same way as the one mentioned before and was very beautiful. We were told that the beautiful young lady who once before had been our hostess would have charge of the services. A few moments after we were seated she entered the room, and we all marveled at her youth and beauty. She wore a beautiful white gown, but there was no attempt at display. She stepped quietly to the small platform and began her address. We are gathered here this evening with the desire to enter into the fuller meaning of passing from a lower to a higher consciousness, and we welcome those of you who are prepared for this. At first, you followed us, led by your interest in the things you have seen us accomplish, which you at first looked upon with awe and wonder, thinking of them as marvelous. We know you have at this time learned to look upon these things as the everyday occurrences of a life lived as it should be lived, a natural everyday life that God would have us live at all times. By this time you are satisfied that we have not performed any marvels. You realize the true spiritual meaning of what you are doing. The consciousness that functions from the true spiritual plane always interprets all forms in terms of the ideal underlying them. Then the great inner meaning is revealed and there is no mystery, consequently no marvel, no miracle. This passing over from a lower to a higher consciousness means putting away the material, where all is discord and inharmony, and taking up and accepting the Christ consciousness, in which all is beauty, harmony, and perfection. This is the natural way of living, the way God sees us living, and the way so beautifully exemplified by Jesus here on earth. The other is the unnatural, the self-way, the hard way. When we realize it, it is so easy, so natural to live the Christ way. Then we come into the Christ consciousness. We have tables spread. This is the only occasion on which we congregate for a feast. It is not a feast such as those in mortal consciousness might think. It is a feast of realization and accomplishment, symbolizing the passing from the mortal to the Christ consciousness, and so greatly misunderstood throughout the world today. We believe that all of God's children will sit down to such a feast someday with a true realization of its meaning. We shall have with us, tonight, a few of those that have so perfected their bodies that they are able to take them into all the celestial realms and there receive the highest teachings. They have all lived a certain time here in visible form, then passed on and taken their bodies with them, to a place in consciousness where they are not visible to mortal eyes, and we must raise our consciousness to the Christ consciousness to converse with them. But those that have so perfected the body that they can take it to this celestial realm can return to us and go away at will. They are able to come and instruct all who are receptive to their teaching and appear and disappear at will. It is these that come and teach us when we are ready to receive instruction, sometimes intuitively and at time by personal contact. There will be 5 of these to break bread with us tonight. Among the 5 is one especially beloved by us, as she is the mother of one of us and has dwelt among us. This proved to be Emil's mother. We will now gather around the tables. The lights were dimmed for a moment and all sat perfectly quiet with bowed heads. Then the lights came on and the 5 stood in the room, 3 men and 2 women. They were all dressed in white and were radiantly beautiful, with a soft glow of light about each one of them. They walked quietly forward and each took a place left vacant at the head of each table. Emil's mother took the place at the head of our table, with our chief at her right and Emil at her left. After the 5 were seated, the edibles began to arrive. It was a simple meal of vegetables, bread, fruit and nuts, but very palatable. The talks that followed were chiefly instructions to those who had assembled for the occasion. They were given in the native tongue and were translated by Jest. I will not include these talks, as the greater part has already been given. Emil's mother, the last speaker, used perfect English and her voice was clear and concise. These were her words: "We use forces every day that man in the mortal concept laughs at. We who are privileged to see and use these are doing all that we can to have men see and know what they are keeping out of their lives by the thoughts they are holding of the perfect things that are right at hand, ready and waiting to be taken hold of. As soon as these forces are taken hold of or appropriated by man, they will be far more real and living than those things that man clings to so desperately in the mortal, clings to because they can be seen, felt, and handled or contacted through the limited mortal senses. You will note that all our comforts in this room and those you are occupying, such as light and Heat and even the things you have eaten are prepared by one of these forces. You may call it light rays or what you will. We see it as a great universal power or force, which, when contacted by man, will work for him far more effectually than steam, electricity, gasoline, or coal, yet we call it one of the least of the forces or powers. This force will not only furnish all the power needed by man, but it will also furnish heat for all his needs, at all times and in all places, without the consumption of 1 pound of fuel of any kind. This force is perfectly noiseless, and if man will contact and use it, it will stop a great deal of the noise and confusion that now seems unavoidable. This power is right at hand all about you, waiting for man to contact and use it. When he does contact and use this force, it will be far simpler than steam or electricity. As man is able to do this, he will see that all modes of power and locomotion that he has devised are but makeshifts that he has brought forth in his own mortal concept. He has thought that he himself has brought them forth, and he has in this way brought forth only that which he could contact with the mortal senses. He has brought forth imperfect things, whereas if man would see that all is of God and from God expressing through him, all things that he brings forth would be perfect. Man, having free will, has chosen the hard way, and instead of realizing his sonship with God and using all that God has, he will go on in the hard way until he is driven to realize that there must be, and really is, a better way. He will eventually know that God's way is the only way. Then he will express the perfection that God sees him expressing right now. Do you not see how you must be centered in the Father within you, drawing the whole of your good from him, and how every force of your nature is to operate from the divine self? In the beginning of all expression is God, the Father, within, else God could not be expressed or brought forth. Here one of our party asked what power or force our thoughts and words had upon our lives. She held out her hand, and in a moment a small object was lying in it. She said, "Let me drop this pebble into this bowl of water." You see that the vibrations caused by the pebbles coming in contact with the water radiate from that center in ever widening circles until they reach the rim of the bowl, or outer edge of the water, where, to the eye, they seem to lose their force and stop. What really happens is this: as soon as the vibrations have reached the limits of the water, they start on their return journey back to the place where the pebble entered the water, and they do not tarry until they reach that center. This exactly represents every thought or word we think or speak. The thought or word sets in motion certain vibrations that go out and on, in ever-widening circles, until they compass the universe. Then they return as they went forth, to the one that sent them out. Every thought or word we think or speak, be it good or bad, returns to us as certainly as we send it forth. This returning is the day of judgment spoken of in your Bible. Every day will be a day of judgment thereof. The judgment will be good or evil, just as the word or thought sent out is good or evil. Every idea is sent out, planted in the soul, held in mind, becomes a conception later to be brought forth or expressed in physical form. Thoughts or ideas of perfection bring forth perfection. Thoughts or ideas of imperfection bring forth imperfection. The sun and earth combined will produce, with equal willingness, the mighty banyan or the smallest flower if the seed is planted. It is in this way that the soul and spirit respond to the call of man, and that for which he asks by word or thought, he receives. The only thing that has separated man from heaven is a mist of material thought that man has created around heaven, and this has given rise to the mysteriousness that surrounds all things divine. This veil of mystery is gradually being pulled aside, and it is found that there is no mystery. Those establishing their different church organizations have found it expedient to surround the things of God with mystery, thinking to get a closer hold upon the people. But all are now finding that the deep things of God are the real, simple things of life. If not, of what avail are they? All are perceiving that the church but typifies the Christ consciousness in man, the God center of humanity. They are perceiving the ideal, instead of worshipping the idol which has been built by mortal thought. Look at the vast number of heterodox organizations springing up on every hand. Though widely diversified now, they are bound to lead to the one. Has not this one thing come forth to bring the churches to the true realization? We who have so perfected our bodies that we are able to take them where we will are privileged to see and be in what is called the celestial realm. This realm is known to a great many as the seventh heaven. This realm is thought to be the very mystery of mysteries. This again is where man in mortal thought has erred. There is no mystery. We have only reached a place in consciousness where we are able to receive the highest teachings, the place where Jesus is today. It is a place in consciousness where we know that by putting off mortality, we are able to take on immortality, where we know that man is immortal, sinless, deathless, unchangeable, eternal, just as God is and as God sees man. A place where we know the real meaning of the transfiguration, where we are able to commune with God and see Him face to face. A place where we know that all can come and receive, and be as we are. We know that, before long, the consciousness of all will be raised to the plane where we can talk with them face to face and see eye to eye. Our withdrawal from their sight is but the raising of our consciousness above that of the mortal, and by this we become invisible only to those in mortal consciousness. We have to look upon three events. One that happened long ago, the one that typifies to you the birth of the Christ consciousness in man, the birth of the babe Jesus. Then the one we can see coming when your great nation accepts and realizes the Christ consciousness. Then we love to turn to the third and last, the greatest of all splendors, the second and last coming of the Christ, when all know and accept the Christ within, and live and unfold in this consciousness and grow as the lilies grow. This is the atonement. Atonement. As she finished, the invisible choir began to sing. The room was at first filled with music, which ended in a solemn dirge. Then there was silence for a moment, and the choir again burst forth with one glad riot of music, with each measure ending in a boom like the stroke of a great bell. This continued until 12 had been sounded, and we suddenly realized that it was 12 o'clock and the new year was here. This ended our first year with these wonderful people. Addendum. In presenting these notes of experiences with the Masters, I wish to emphasize my personal belief in the powers of these Masters and in their demonstration of a great law, a law that must carry a profound message to the whole human race. They proved conclusively that there is a law that transcends death, and that all humanity in its evolution is slowly moving forward to understand and use it. The Masters say this law will be brought forth in America, will be given to the world, and then all may know the way to eternal life. This, they acclaim, is the unfoldment of the new age. None of the manifestations referred to in these notes were the materialization of the ordinary seance, far from it. It was the higher expression making the body visible and invisible at will, a glorifying and spiritualizing of the flesh. There is a God law, and human beings will soon inherit it, become illumined, and use the body with understanding. In full masterhood there is no question but these people have brought the light through the long ages, and they prove by their daily life and works that this light does exist just as it did thousands of years ago. BTS.